Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait a few more minutes while people get logged in. While we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about how you can participate in this webinar. We encourage questions and feedback. So your control panel, we've got functionality. Who is that?
Sorry, that's my dog.
Oh, okay. All right. We have an extra spectator this morning. So on your control panel, you can switch back and forth between your computer audio and your phone audio. And then also there's a place to type in questions. You can type those in at any time during this webinar. We'll probably wait till the end though to go through those questions, but feel free to type them in as you think of them. And if we're not able to get to all the questions this morning, you can email me and I can set you up with Joe and any further feedback or anything that we need to do. We can certainly do that. All right, Gayla, you ready?
I'm ready. Good morning, everybody. So glad to see everybody. I can see everybody coming in as attendant, so that's great. So good morning. And I also know by your attendance that we have people outside of Missouri, so welcome. I know that Joe has a following, as Keith says, and so many people are joining us here in Missouri for this webinar, just because we know that Joe's going to have great information to share with us this morning. I want to remind you all that we have another webinar coming up next week. Go ahead and get signed up for it right after this one. And I also want to make for sure that you guys are going to our COVID-19 resources on momainstreet.org. We have many resources there to help businesses restart, as well as programs knowing how to build resources for their small businesses and to get things rolling. But of course, there's all kinds of other resources there, as well as grant opportunities for many of our Main Street programs. There's different incentive grants out there that we can be applying for, so be for sure to check that out. So again, good morning, and let's get started. So Joe, thank you so much for joining us. We know that with all the different things that you have going on, I know you're extremely busy, but you've always been great to us here in Missouri. And we're going to just turn it over to you.
All right, Joe, I'm going to turn over the presenter mode to you, so that should be in your hands. There we go.
Can you guys see everything now?
Yep.
All right. So thank you, Gayla, and thank you, Keith, for having me on today. My name is Joe Borgstrom. I'm a principal with a firm called Placemaking Advisors. I've got a little bio slide here. To give you kind of the long story short is we specialize in economic development planning and public relations, as well as community marketing. And we've been in existence for about 4 years. Prior to that, I got to oversee the work with the Michigan Main Street program in the state of Michigan. For some reason, I'm on a time slide now. Of course, this is always going to happen this way. Actually, I'm going to pause for just a second, make sure I take out all these transitions just to make sure that we're not going to have to deal with this the entire time. Oh, let's see here. Sorry, guys, I did not anticipate this part. Let's see, no transitions. There we go, perfect.
And then apply to all.
Yeah, I had highlighted all of them as I did that. All right. So anyways, long story short is I've been doing economic development for over 20 years. I've been doing downtown redevelopment as part of that. I consider them kind of subsets of the same field. What I really want to talk to folks about this morning the most about is a little bit about kind of strategic planning. And dang it, there it goes again. But what I really want to talk about is this idea that we're all kind of drinking from a fire hose right now. As one of our friends, Jay Slinsdog from he's been doing reopenmainstreet.com, but he's with Downtown Professionals Network. Sorry, I've known Jay for so long, I just refer to him as Jay. Sorry, Jay.
And Joe, he's our speaker next week for our webinar.
Oh, Jay is perfect. So I'm going to totally steal his thunder for next week.
And I didn't want to mention that yet because I wanted you to be the hero.
Well, I appreciate that, but Jay, my apologies in advance. I've actually a couple of things I want to show you actually because I think Jay has done such an outstanding job. We'll talk about that, but there is a huge amount of information out there, and I think people kind of feel overwhelmed by it to some degree. So really, I refer to this as drinking from the fire hose. And what I really want to focus on with, especially our Main Street managers, is what it is that you guys can do in this time, because there's so much information out there, there's so much going on. I really want to kind of relate it back to what we know the most in our Main Street worlds. And so what I want to talk about is kind of that strategic reopening plan. So there's really kind of 4 steps to this that I want to talk about. The first is about organization. So we have to organize, we have to plan, we have to execute, and then we have to evaluate. So this is a lot like what we know in terms of the Main Street world. Now, when we talk a little bit later about Jay's website, I won't spend a ton of time on it because I know Jay's going to talk all about it. But what I want to talk about, though, is I think one of the things that's really important and that what Main Street really knows about is kind of that Main Street approach. So planning your work plans, figuring out who's going to do what by when, how much is it going to cost. This is still a core of what we have. And one of the things that Jay has on his website that I really like a lot is the fact that he puts a statement out saying nobody has been through this before. There is no consultant who can claim that they've been through a pandemic, that they've kind of helped restart. Folks have been through disasters and they've worked through different types of things, but I'm here to tell you today that when we look at reopening our communities, that using our Main Street approach is a very viable methodology for that. And really, we want to talk about kind of these 4 steps. So the first step I want to talk about is organizing. And I think it's really important that we understand what the customer preferences are. And understanding that, because no matter what the government says, whether or not your downtown is ready to reopen, the customer still rules. And as we've seen in a couple of other states, and we've worked with Arkansas over the last couple of weeks, there are states who have not done stay-at-home orders, and they're still seeing the same decrease in businesses that you are in Missouri and in places around the country, because customers aren't comfortable. So understanding what the customer wants is job number 1. So getting a survey out there, this is one I blatantly stole from Downtown Lansing Inc., Owasso Main Street. Both of these are Michigan Main Street communities. They both have done online surveys, but starting to understand what customers want as we start to come back. It's not going to be this is not going to be a typical Main Street event where we, say this is the date and everybody's going to show up and we're going to have a big parade. We can't do that, obviously, under these conditions. But what we have to understand is what customers want, or what's going to make them feel more at home. So, but part of that is we're going to have to figure out, what their expectations are. What are they going to feel comfortable with in terms of those safety measures? The more demonstratable they can be, it's often going to be more beneficial for the businesses. But sometimes, when we're talking about things like masks and gloves, whether they're required or not, they may be required by the state of Missouri. In Michigan, masks actually are required for those businesses. But if they're not, will customers expect to have their wait staff at a restaurant wear a mask? Are they going to be comfortable with that? And we have to understand kind of what those expectations are. Are they willing to have shopping by appointment? Is that something that they're willing to do if they feel like they can get to the store themselves, or at least within a small group? Kind of that exclusivity, this VIP type of event type of situation, but how can they do that? And then, of course, what their expectations are on limiting customers. So I think it's important to understand, where people are in terms of what's going to make them feel comfortable. I don't think we're going to see people who are excited to be in a crowded room anymore. I think, I know you guys have in Missouri some very specific square footage issues in some of the cities where it's 10%. I got a slide on it here a little bit later. I don't remember the stat off the top of my head, so I don't want to quote it. But based on that, and think about too who your stakeholders are and who's being affected by that. And I'm not a huge fan of the term stakeholder, but understanding those who are affected, the types of businesses. And I think we need to start categorizing these businesses a little bit differently, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we want to talk about having a steering committee. So whether this is your Main Street board or just kind of an ad hoc group, don't be afraid, in my opinion, to have an ad hoc group just to get through this. Because I think, we're really kind of throwing some of the rules out the window on how we typically do Main Street types of activities, but I want to make sure that we talk about, having this idea that we're including people who are affected. And this might be an opportunity, by the way, to engage people who have not traditionally been engaged in your program as well. Again, here's the plug for Jay's website, and Jay's going to talk all about that next week. And I'll skim through what I was going to talk about because I didn't realize Jay was coming up. But I want you to think about starting with industry work groups. So these are the different groups who are affected by industry. So restaurants are going to have a little different than retail will have, and then salons and barbershops are going to be a little bit different, and then service and nonprofits. So understanding kind of what those expectations are in each of those sectors is going to be really important. But getting those groups together, and again, this is going to be difficult because everyone's busy, everyone's trying to figure out how to do it, but getting them to work together so they can figure it out together will be incredibly important. And this will allow and can potentially foster new partnerships between those groups. The other piece of this I want to talk about is the public realm. So I mean both the governmental functions as well as the public space. So we'll want to talk about how we want to utilize that. We've got some ideas about that we're going to talk about in a minute. But you want to brainstorm what some of those solutions are by industry, because there are a lot of great suggestions out there about what can be done and how we can do those. And then of course, one of the most important parts about this is as you reopen your communications and marketing. So how are we talking about this? How are we promoting these businesses? How are we going about and making this thing happen? Again, I'm not going to belabor this because I know Jay's going to talk about this, but hit the reopenmainstreet.com. If you have not been there, I highly recommend it. Jay just killed it. Matter of fact, I told him as a fellow consultant, I'm pissed I didn't think of it first. It's just really outstanding. If you're looking for brainstorming ideas, Jay's done a really good job of incorporating all of those. Some of the things I also want to show you a couple of best practices. So this idea of face masks, you know, they have a tendency to be kind of intimidating sometimes when we see just a blank face mask. A couple of months ago, I was joking with, all this started, I joked with Ben Muldrow from Arnett Muldrow & Associates that, hey, 2 words, branded face mask, just kind of joking around about it. And lo and behold, here we are in May, and we're saying, hey, this is a best practice. You should actually look at having branded face masks. So this is how fast everything's going. But this idea of being able to see either corporate or your community brand being reflected in those masks as part of that. This is part of the public realm. I want to show this picture real quick about industry specific solutions, but this is about using the public realm. This is actually in Dallas, one of the commercial districts in Dallas. They're now using parklets. So we've heard about parklets, we've seen them executed on parking day and some of these other things, but now we're seeing the execution of the public realm, whether that's the parking lots out front or the sidewalk in front, for restaurants as an example, because a lot of restaurants are being limited in terms of how many, what their capacity is going to be, whether it's going to be, I know in Arkansas, they're going to be limited to a third and then to 2/3 and then full. And then I believe yours is all based on square footage. But this idea of being allowing the public realm to be used for these businesses, because if you talk to a lot of the restaurant industry, they need about 50% to start to break even in terms of their capacity inside their restaurant. So if we can add square footage to them on top of what they would normally do, then we're going to give them the added opportunity to add more seating to allow folks to come in and eat and still be able to meet those requirements. So, but defining what those industry specific solutions are, and then I think we need to be flexible enough to be able to find sources of funding for these things, because again, we realize, I think everyone realizes, all of these small businesses are in the same boat in terms of not being able to necessarily pay for a lot of this stuff. So if we can use any of our local nonprofit funds, if we can use local Cdbg, if we can be using some of these creative sources and kind of get to a spot where we can do this. I have a feeling what we're going to see is, I think we're going to see some of the stuff be very successful and then go from a short-term solution to a long-term best practice. Because I'm a big believer, I think, using the public realm for restaurants in particular, but we can also use it for retail. As an example, we do it for sidewalk sales. What we can certainly expand into the public realm as long as we can do it in a way that's fair. Then when we talk about kind of implementing those solutions, again, identifying what you want to do, identifying the resources in which to execute it, and then of course the hardest part, implementing. So making sure that you're doing what it is that you say that you're doing. And then lastly, we want to evaluate, are the things that we're talking about working? Are we doing the things that are necessary? Are the things that we're trying working? If they're not, let's go back to the drawing board. And I think the number one key in all this is being flexible. So adapting, being creative. I'm a big fan of R&D. Occasionally I'm critical of it because I think we rely too much on the rip-off and duplication R&D method. in Main Street, but I do think it's an ability for us to be able to look and see what other folks are doing, try that, but don't be afraid to be creative either. So try to figure out what might be beneficial for your businesses. Communications and marketing, I think, is really important during all this. We want to make sure we're communicating what businesses are reopening, what their timelines are for all of this. You should be featuring 1 to 2 businesses a day on your Facebook, on your social media, saying, hey, this so-and-so is open, this is what their hours are. And then, of course, good news stories. The media today are so hungry for good news stories amid all this COVID stuff. There's so much doom and gloom. There is so much negativity that's out there about this, that the more good news stories that we can promote, the better off we are. And the good news is, as Main Street organizations, you are credible sources of information for the media. So making sure that we're building those relationships now, if you haven't already. I will also tell you that I think one of the things that this crisis is revealing is how prepared we are, how flexible, how good of an organization you are in terms of communication and adaptability. But the communication, I think, is really key as we talk about this, and particularly the opportunity to share those good news stories. I will tell you that we've seen it. The example we gave yesterday was in Jonesboro, Arkansas, just south of you guys, where you had the one building owner who very early on said, this is a crisis. We're telling all of our restaurant clients, don't pay us for April. We'll worry about it later. Just don't pay us for April. And that one story got covered and then got covered again. And then next thing you know, they're on CNN, they're on Good Morning America, they're on the Today Show. You do not have to pitch national outlets. If you pitch your local stories and that gets picked up by, say, like the AP, then those types of stories get kind of picked up and blown up. So making sure that you're sharing those good news stories is important in all this. I'm gonna give you a couple of examples on how you can communicate. There's a lot of information out there. This was Woodstock, Virginia, had done this. So they did one on dining options. You can see it's nothing sexy. It's just saying, here's the businesses, who's doing dining, who's doing delivery, who's doing takeout only, who's doing curbside, who's closed temporarily, and what their contact information is. Very bare bones, but it's still done kind of in a nice way, but it's not exactly, not this big, huge glossy thing, but we want to make sure that we're communicating clearly and effectively. Here's what they did for the retail shopping options, something very similar as well. I want to point out here, and I'm going to harp on this here in just a second, but the products listed online, look at the number of businesses. Some of those businesses could have an online presence in terms of sales, others can't, but the number of those who do and the number of those who don't is shocking. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. So I want to talk just for a couple of seconds about Main Street, because I know, this is Missouri Main Street Connection, and we're talking to a lot of Main Street managers. There may be some other managers from other states or coordinators or whoever else. I think it's important for us to realize that the Main Street's role has changed. I know there's the biggest complaint within our industry is that, Main Street is seen as the party planners, and that's really, really not what we need right now. Our businesses are in survival mode. So we have to be their chief advocate. So how can we connect them to resources, checking in with them, just kind of being the bartender. Sometimes I don't mean that literally, but maybe, who knows? Everyone could use a beer during this time, I'm sure. But this idea of just talking to them and seeing how they're doing and kind of being that voice, being their advocate, I think is really important. Also being kind of the chief promoter for your Main Street is important because no one else is going to do that. It's your job anyways, frankly, but to be able to kind of really ramp that up and make sure that message is being pumped out there. And then of course, you're also the chief economic development officer for the downtown. So how is it, that we can help, use the public realm? How can we use all these different things in order to help the economic development position for our businesses and for our communities to be stronger at this time? And then the other piece of this is that your organization has to be flexible too. Frankly, I would say if you take your programming, you take your budget and kind of just throw it out the window and say, all right, if we had to start over today, what do we need to do? I think being that flexible, if you had a big part of your budget tied up in producing an event later in the year, that's probably not going to happen. So how else can we use those potential funds, net funds, in order to be able to help, our businesses today? Because right now, we see a number of businesses, we've talked about it in previous happy hours, if you're familiar with the program that we've been doing with Ben Muldrow and Jeff Siegler. We think that potentially up to 20-25% of businesses may not survive. So how can we be flexible in the offerings of what we've budgeted, and how can we kind of look at our programming for the remainder of this year in a way that's going to benefit these businesses right now. Because, you know, I don't think we should be looking 6 months down the road. I think we need to be looking 3 months down the road right now, because I think it's that big of a crisis for a lot of our businesses. All right, I'm going to transition real quick to reimagining retail. I want to talk about your numbers specifically in the survey that Main Street America did, because I think you guys were one of the largest responders for this survey, and I thought it was really telling. So you had 261 response, was this huge. Almost 53% of your businesses that responded had been around for more than 10 years. This is really important. These are hardcore retailers. These are folks who have made a long-term commitment to your main streets. They're not rookies. They've survived. They've probably grown in those 10 years. So you're looking at a huge number of these folks who are responding to this being people who are not necessarily hobbyists. These are people who are actual business owners. And of those, 73% of those folks are locally owned. 55% are women owned. So this is really important numbers when we look at the local economic development of what we do with Main Street. This is really kind of the heart of it. The part of this I think is interesting. So 72% of those have 5 or fewer. But to me, the really devastating number here is this one, is 51.3% have experienced revenue loss of 75% or more. That is a huge number. And I will tell you that, you know, that's a very similar number. Matter of fact, I think Arkansas, again, we talked with yesterday, Arkansas's number is actually even higher. They're at 55%. And they did not have a stay-at-home order. Their retail did not close, but they are still seeing that 75% drop off because customers are not comfortable. Now, when you pair that with frankly, the statistic that makes me angry more than anything else is that almost 63% don't have an online sales component to what they do. Folks, this is the fundamental blocking and tackling of retail in 2020. You cannot expect, pandemic aside, crisis aside, we have to have businesses have an online sales component, period. If you're going to be successful, if you're going to survive, when you look at this, that you've seen a 75% drop in revenue and you don't have an online sales, I can tell you why you have a 75% drop in revenue. The other problem with this is that if you sell any product whatsoever that goes out the front of your door, if you're not open 24 hours a day, which who is, then you might as well have this sign in your door. Because we're telling folks that if you can't buy during the hours of 9 to 5 or 10 to 7 or whenever it is that your brick and mortar is open, then we're just telling you, you know what, go somewhere else instead. Go to Amazon, because they'll be able to serve you when we can't. We need to make sure that our businesses have viable online selling options. So whether that's, you know, selling the actual product or booking services or being even to sell gift cards online, we need to make sure that we have this component. This is something that's been harped on for 20 years, frankly, and we should have been doing it much sooner. Nothing exposes our inability to plan like a crisis. And right now we're seeing that exposed for a huge number of businesses in our main streets. I would say the number one thing your main street should be doing to help your businesses is getting them selling online. Even regardless of what your reopening strategy is, if they're closed, if they're reopened, that online portal will continue to bring sales into them for years. And we need to make sure that they're online, far and away. Everything else, to me, I think is secondary. But let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that we're seeing in retail. So number one is you want to get that customer feedback and make sure you're adhering to state requirements. So making sure that we understand what the customers want, what they're expecting. You know, there's probably going to be, when this is the case in a lot of places, reduced customers in the store at one time. In Missouri, I know it was 25% capacity if you're under 10,000, and it's 10% capacity if you're over 10,000. Cleanliness is a must, and I would say it has to be demonstratable, and almost to the point of theater. I'll give you a quick analogy here, a quick story. We've been trying to do as much takeout as we can, helping to support our locally owned restaurants here. And there's a local restaurant that's literally 5 minutes from our house. We ordered to go. I went in there. None of the staff is wearing masks. You know, it was, you know, I had to go in to get it, and I had, you know, paid, you know, actually signed the receipt, the whole 9 yards. And then we got our food and came home. The other place is literally a 15-minute drive from where we live. And as we were there was everything. Everybody was distanced 6 feet. Everybody was wearing masks. as you signed the piece of paper, they took that pen and put it in another section, like another pot that needed to be still sterilized, while the owner walked around, and again, it was takeout only, but was constantly wiping down the countertops that people were standing next to. He was wiping down the phones in between the employees answering. It has to almost be a theatrical event to clean, so folks understand, you know, that your place of business is clean. It's almost, I hate to say comedic, but to the point where people really understand. Again, the idea about shopping by appointment, I think, is a valuable one. The more customer service that you can provide, the better off you're going to be. So personal shopping, local deliveries. We've actually seen one of our favorite retailers here in the Lansing area. If it's within 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the shop, at the end of the day, she actually packs up the stuff and delivers it herself. So it's same day, and it's being hand delivered by the owner. Now, I realize that's not always applicable for everybody, but if you are able to do that, she is willing to do that for her customers as well. And then want to talk about floor layout. You really want to look at that in terms of minimizing contact with other folks. We've seen some of the places that we go. One of our favorite meat markets actually went to an entire one-way system within their grocery store, and you had to go this. It's not the optional one-way. We've seen the optional one-ways at Kroger and some of the other chains. This one was, this is the way you have to go through the store, and you had to go through the store to get to the meat counter to get what you needed, and then you got out. So looking at some of those things, that's kind of extreme, but looking at those types of options, contactless paper options, I think, are important. Cooperative marketing, I want to give you a couple of examples of that, both cooperative in terms of district matching funds, but more importantly, businesses cross-promoting each other. And I want to give you an example about that. And my God, get a website. If you don't have a website that has a viable sales option, that is job number one that has to make sure on there. And if you don't, then you should be using things like social media to sell. And I'll give you an example about that here in a second. This is actually one of our favorite retailers. This is Grace Boutique in Old Town, Lansing, which is a Great American Main Street Award winner. Grace, their website does not have product, does not have a sales function. And she typically, one of her big events is this big spring event. And instead, she decided to do a Facebook Live. And I want to show you something here. When she did this event, it was on April 24th. Today is May 6th. So in the couple of weeks since she's had this, there's been, as she did it, you know, you're looking at 372 comments, 14 shares. People who were customers of hers were sharing her essentially, and she joked about it, calling it a QVC. 2,600 views on this Facebook Live event, in which people were literally saying, hey, I'll take, and she numbered the items and she talked about what number they were and how much they were. Literally, it was an hour show that she put on. And the amount of sales that she was able to generate during that hour of loyal customers, and then who those loyal customers turn around and shared that video with other folks, you know, really kind of allowed for her to make up some of that ground of not having a website that allowed her to sell. And I know that there are some boutiques and some retailers who don't like the idea of that online option because customer service is their big thing, but you can still provide that customer service by having that and having that online option at one. They're not mutually exclusive. This is a really cool program going on in Wyoming. It's a local printer partnering with the local businesses, so supporting the local business. Half the money goes to the t-shirt operator, the t-shirt business, the other half goes to the actual business themselves. So it's a way for the local businesses to promote themselves. It's all on-demand printing, so they don't have to necessarily have a bunch of this stuff. So it's not just, say, the brew company or anything like that. It could be just a local shop that people want to support. So this is one of those ways that folks can help kind of cross-promote with one another and help each other out. This one, sorry, my apologies for this one, because this was actually a picture taken off my screen on the TV, and I paused the TV in order to take this picture. This is from a commercial from one of our regional auto groups that own a lot of the dealerships, and they're running a special right now where if you collect your receipts from locally owned businesses, they'll match dollar for dollar up to $1,000 towards a new car. So they're using that as a way to help promote using other small locally owned businesses within their kind of greater area, but also helping promote their product as well. So, but it's a good way to help kind of motivate people to go spend at locally owned businesses. And then lastly, this one was done. This is pretty cool. This is in Saugatuck, Michigan, which is on Lake Michigan. There's a channel that kind of goes through downtown. This is a boat rental, and they specialize in retro boats. So the wood boats, those types of things. This is kind of a unique thing. But what they did was they picked a week and said, if you book for midweek, which is their slow time because the weekends is when everybody when everybody wants to rent a boat and be out on the lake. But if you rent during the week, they'll take 50% of that rental and buying a gift card at one of the local businesses downtown of your choosing. So I want to be able to go rent a boat for a couple hours and then go to dinner. If the boat is $100 to rent, you'll get $50 back of that of a gift card. So they're taking their slow time during that period and then cutting their fee in half and then literally helping support another local business to be able to help bring people into downtown. So I know that was a little bit more of the fire hose, I think, than I probably intended. But I think with that, now we'll kind of open it up for questions. Keith and Kayla, turn it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Joe. That was great information. Before we switch to questions, I'm going to remind folks, go ahead and type in your questions. But I wanted you, Joe, to do a commercial for your downtown happy hour and your 3-day bender.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate that opportunity. So since this stuff started, I don't know, we're on week 8. I can't remember which week we're on now, but myself and Ben Muldrow from Arnett Muldrow and Associates and Jeff Siegler from Revitalize or Die, we got together again 7-8 weeks ago. We were talking about, it'd be great for us, everybody to kind of get together, just have a beer virtually. We're all kind of socially distanced. We can't get together professionally anymore. So we decided to start doing this thing called Downtown Happy Hour. I know we've got a lot of folks from Missouri who show up for that. We appreciate you doing that. Which is on Thursdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 to 5 your time. But our plan for the Downtown Happy Hour was to never do it in perpetuity. It was really a planned thing. It was kind of a fun thing. We've had some really outstanding guests. Matter of fact, this week we've got Ileana Prus from Recast City, who's going to be our guest. And we've had some great insight and input from a lot of folks. But what we decided to do was to say, all right, we have to stop this at some point. At some point we're all going to kind of return to normal. And we were really, we were disappointed. We understood. I think everybody understood the canceling of the Main Street Now conference, National Main Street Conference, which we all love and go to. And frankly, it's one of our best. It's the best opportunity for us all to get together and network and just frankly see old friends. I'd love to be able to buy Keith and Gayla a beer when we get together, and we won't be able to do that this year. But what we decided was, if there's not going to be a conference, if there's not going to be something going on, why don't we just do something crazy? Why don't we put together, just a quick 3-day conference? And that's what we're doing right now. Is we've got a stable of speakers. We're going to get ready to announce that here shortly. But we're going to do 3 days, and we're going to do from noon until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the 19th, the 20th, and 21st. And at the end of each day, we're going to do a special happy hour where we kind of recap the day. And it's going to be really different. We're calling it an unconference, mainly because it's not a traditional conference, where all of our presenters are going to record a 45-minute presentation, but they're going to be interacting with folks in the comment section as it airs on Facebook Live. And then the last 15 minutes is going to be the live Q&A with folks and that presenter being live on screen. So it'll be an opportunity to be kind of like getting the director's cut of a presentation. So they'll be able to make comment in the sections. And then the last day, on that Thursday, the 21st, will be what we're calling the final call. So it's the last call for the happy hour. It'll be our last show. And we've got a special surprise lined up for the end of that. So we hope folks will be able to join us. It's a free event that's going to be on Facebook Live in the Downtown Happy Hour Facebook group. So if you haven't joined yet, we encourage you to join that.
Wow, talk about anticipation.
Yeah, really. And I have to say, when you brought it up during happy hour, I got so many texts from different directors and state coordinators going, do you think he's serious? I mean, this is great.
We're just bummed that we can't do the after hours networking. We love getting together with our friends. It's one to me some of the best part. The sessions are great, and it's great to see everybody, but it's really nice to see our friends. And so we really wanted to, this was an opportunity, and a vast majority of the folks who are going to be presenting our fellow consultants. None of us are getting paid to do this. We're not asking for anything. This is our gift to to all of our clients, to everybody out here doing this stuff. We have had the most hellish 3 months I can imagine any of us have ever had. This has been absolutely bizarre to be a part of. And so it was one of those things that we felt like we could do to lend our expertise and to be able to kind of put this out there for our friends, our clients, communities all over who are dealing with stuff. So you're going to see a broad range of topics. We're going to cover a lot of stuff and then have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
So Joe, give the date. Joe, give the dates real quick.
Oh, sure, yeah, May 19th, 20th, and 21st.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. All right, I do have a couple questions. Gayla, do you just want to ask yours directly? I do have it here.
Sure. Let me get back to it. Okay, so Joe, yesterday we were on our We Care calls with all of our directors, and we had a lot of conversation about the stimulus money now going to the counties, and then the counties have to put it out to the cities. And so we were talking to our directors about, we need to make for sure that Main Street's at the table, because they are a huge part of the economy. And as long as it's recovery, part of the economics of recovery, Main Street could position themselves in there. And so we gave them some ideas yesterday. We have one director that's really working closely with her city, and they're pushing that. But then even after our conversation, we had a lot of the directors is like, how do we do that? So I just wanted to know, since you're out in the field and touch many states, what are you hearing, and how's that going?
Well, actually, I sat through the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG CV, so that's part of the stimulus package with HUD. And if you ever have a hard time falling asleep, I highly suggest attending one of the webinars on CDBG. Does it for you every time.
Yeah, we know.
Reaching out to the CDBG office, the individual CDBG offices, because there is a portion of that CV money that is designated for economic recovery. So I think the first thing is letting them know that you're there. They're not going to fund ongoing operations. It's only going to be things that are going to be new. That's typical, I think, of all CDBG.
Yes.
But I think, making sure that you're reaching out to those local offices and saying, here are the thoughts that we have. And as long as it's serving, if your area is 51% low mod, or if you're, a part of a district that's serving a part of your community that is that way, or the people who are, the jobs who are affected are low mod, we can fund some of those things. So like the idea of enhancing the public realm, as long as it's publicly owned, we can use some of those funds to be able to do that. So outdoor seating, the parklet idea, I think those are things that would probably be eligible. But I think reaching out to those folks, and I think politely doing it. CDBG, if folks aren't familiar with CDBG, I had the good fortune / curse of working with CDBG for a number of years, and getting folks to push the envelope on CDBG is very, very difficult. But if there's a time to do it, now is it, because they're being asked to do something. And quite frankly, I think there's a lot of ways that CDBG CV can be used, and the traditional methods for that, the traditional users of that, don't know how to do it. And so they're looking for ways to be able to do it. So I think reaching out, introducing yourself if you don't already have a relationship, and explaining, here's what we do. We would love to be able to find a way to be able to fund X, Y, Z, be able to think about what those potential, uses would be, but go in with a thought of building that relationship, not just for the existing CV money, but for future money down the road, because I'm sure this is just going to be the tip of the iceberg. So how do we, build that for the future?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
So I have a question from Amy. Great point about Main Streets not being viewed as party planners. But does anybody have any idea of when they're going to start doing events? Are you starting to hear about that, Joe? And honoring contracts that you currently have with folks. Census kind of talking about, I think, like 4th of July community type activities.
Yeah, I think that's going to be difficult because, again, it's going to be up to, and that may be something you'll want to ask in your community survey. Is to ask, it's not necessarily can you put it on, is if you put it on, will anybody show up? I think the last thing anybody wants to do is produce an event that loses money. And I think so the idea of planning on having a significantly reduced amount of people showing up, maybe adjusting it, either postponing if you can. Honestly, frankly, I'm seeing models that are saying we won't get back to quote unquote normal, for 12 to 18 months. So, planning for social distancing. So if you're going to do concerts in a park, I think that's going to be easier to do than say, packing everybody into a small area. You might want to look at augmenting. So if you want to encouraging, folks to come down and shop, doing things like having people, corner performers, something where there is distance between people that can add to that liveliness, that can add to those types of things, but not have to have everyone kind of packed into one spot. I think how we get our revenue, if it's from those events, that's going to be, I think, the toughest nut to crack as we look at this stuff, because we can't rely on packing in numbers anymore. The beer tents are always huge, money makers here in Michigan. We may not be able to do that. If we can start to, and this will be a conversation I think with our respective legislators, is if we can start doing like beer to go, like we're seeing craft breweries being able to do, we'll have to, I think, just kind of adjust on how we make those, make that money.
Yeah, and if you think about it, a lot of our Main Street programs do put on events to drive traffic to the small businesses. So, still trying to figure out how to push people to the small businesses. But I think exactly what you said of, instead of having the concert in the park, maybe there's a little concert on every street corner. So you're spreading things out, but you're still being able to drive people downtown to then take advantage of the businesses and the restaurants.
Right.
Yeah, great. This one is more of a comment, but I just get your feedback. Lindsay says, we've seen a significant increase in online sales from their businesses in downtown. Let's see, since the survey was completed by our businesses as they determine ways to pivot, we are now pushing them to keep those platforms post-pandemic. One of the questions in our survey was, yes, no, whether you have online sales, but then we also had one, the answer is still in development. And a lot of folks, they always put that on the back burner of having a website, and this pushed them into that. So I would imagine you're seeing that in other places also.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, when this happened early on, another one of our favorite retailers, a place called October Moon, also in Old Town, went and talked to her, and they were at that point, almost the theatrical cleaning, constantly cleaning. They were doing all these things that we've already recommended. They were doing a month and a half ago. And the conversation I had with her was, she even said, listen, for 20 years, I didn't want to do a website because I want people in my store because their customer service was superior. But she even said it forced me to move online. And she did it within basically about a week and a half because she put her mind to it. She took advantage of the slower time in her store and did it. And so she's now seeing benefit of taking that time to doing it. So we're seeing folks who, may have traditionally not done that, but are now kind of forced to do it now. And I think that they're realizing the benefit. They grudgingly, if you put a flag in the ground that, hey, we're not going to have a website, and all of a sudden you're forced to do it after 20 years, and then you see the benefit of it, and then you go, okay, it's not so bad.
Now you have this whole world that's a customer.
That's right. To me, I think that was one of the things that I conveyed to this particular retailer, because it's one of those places where if you have friends and family from out of town, where do you take them? We literally brought friends and family. We brought family from California there last year, and they loved this. They fell in love with the store. They loved the store so much, and then as soon as they left, I told her, I said, as soon as they went back to California, they were no longer your customer. They would love to be able to still support your business, but they can't because you're not online. Yep. And so I think that hit home for her a little bit as well.
Yeah.
We had a retailer, a meat retailer, actually specialty meats, on with us last week, and their sales have skyrocketed. So it was just great. It was great to hear some of those great stories.
Yep.
I think from a customer standpoint, people still want to support their small businesses, even if they're concerned about social distancing and they're concerned about about COVID. If we can give them a way to support and meet their needs, they're going to support. I mean, that's at the end of the day, they still want to spend money. And there's one, that there's a consumer need, but two, there is that emotional connection. And I think I think we're kind of gift carded out, to some extent. I think people want to start spending those gift cards and start spending that money, and giving them a responsible way to do it online. To me, I think is probably the easiest and fastest way.
All right, we have a couple more questions. Ben asked, so what does it mean to be the Chief Economic Development Officer, especially as we are recovering? What can Main Street staff, committee, and volunteers do to not only help retain, but to encourage new businesses to invest?
Honestly, I think the more you can do to retain, the better that helps your attraction, because first it retains and it helps those folks expand. I will tell you that businesses who are looking for other places are looking for places where they can be successful. And if you can be a community where you help your existing businesses be successful, then you're going to attract other businesses, because that word travels. But I think engaging your committees and doing that right now, take care. My advice is for the next 3 to 6 months, take care of your own. do everything you can for all these businesses who are here, put your attraction side on hold. And then once you're able to also demonstrate, keep track, take photos, do all the stuff that we've been telling you to do for years with Main Street, but do that, because then 6-12 months from now, as you talk to prospective businesses, and you can ask them, what were you doing during the downturn? Here's what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So then it becomes kind of that, you're able to show folks what you're able to do. And as far as being the Chief Economic Development Officer, Main Streets, I think, already are, because you should be doing your building inventory. So, let's talk about that 20-25% who may not survive. What are you going to do with that vacant real estate now? So you've got to be making sure that you're marketing, what you have available. If you haven't updated your market data, I know there are a lot of consultants who don't put a lot of stock in market data. I think it helps justify decisions a lot of times, more times than not. But being able just to understand kind of where you stand on things is important. And I think, to some extent, some of our market data is going to be in flux for a while. This is really interesting that all of this unemployment, everything that's happening as a ripple effect of all this is happening in the middle of the census.
Right.
So I'm really curious what's going to happen here in 2 to 3 years when all of our market data is built off of the census, is happening in this giant blip in the economy. That's completely, not a normal cyclical thing that happens with an economy. So I'll be really curious to see how that works. But as far as the economic development goes, I think making sure you're documenting what you're doing, and then being able to show prospective businesses, here's what we did for our existing businesses. Because if you want to be part of an environment that helps you, then this is where we are. Because I think, I always say, I apologize, I'm giving you a 5-minute answer to a 10-second question. But I always say that Main Street is a risk mitigation strategy. If you're a banker, if you're in the business of risk mitigation, if you don't want to waste your money, to me, Main Street is the largest risk mitigation program there is. So if you're a business owner and you want to minimize the amount of risk, and you want to maximize your ability to be successful, then you should be in a Main Street community who looks out for you. Because other businesses are kind of in a strip center by themselves, and it's them against the world. If you're part of a Main Street community, then there's a whole ecosystem around you that's trying to make you successful. And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest pitches that we should be making.
That's a great point. And I just want to remind folks we have about 10 minutes left. If you have additional questions, please go ahead and type those in, and we should be able to get to those. So next question by Bailey is, what can local governments do to help small businesses on and off Main Street, assuming we have no funds to help them with direct spending or infrastructure improvements?
Sure. Yeah, because honestly, all over the country, we see limited help with cash from municipalities. Public realm, I think, is number one. Is how can we be using our sidewalks? How can we use our parking lots, our on-street parking to assist our businesses? So what we've seen already during this last month and a half, 2 months, are municipal governments either actively helping with curbside, parking as an example for curbside pickup for our restaurants, or simply looking the other way. And that's perfectly okay too. I mean, it's just not getting in the way is an important role to play sometimes. But I think, how can we use that public realm to be able to help our businesses? So that's sidewalk utilization, even some of the things of looking at redirecting some of our existing funding. We're gonna, there's going to be funds out there for that. Cdbg, CV is part of that. But being able to use like public hand washing stations or hand sanitation, being able to help make people feel comfortable within that environment, I think is going to be important. That being said, we still need to do some of the things I think that we traditionally do. Thibodaux in Louisiana just did a social distancing cleanup for their downtown, as an example. So they had all their flower, the places in downtown where they do the flowers, they do the beautification. They had stations where they dropped off everything, and then each person signed up for a station. So they were physically distanced away from everybody, but they were still able to get done what they needed to get done. And so still using the assets that you have, I think, is important. But then again, looking at the public realm and how we can be utilizing that to help restaurants and retailers.
Okay, Joe, we've had quite a few questions. So we're gonna have to do a little rapid fire here.
All right, Brant.
We decided to hold, this is from Julie, we decided to hold off on opening our dining room. Seeing what happens to the local Mexican restaurants last night confirmed it. We border Jackson County, which is in the Kansas City area, and they're not opening until May 15th. When we open, we're going to do a reservation-only platform until June. This may be an option for small businesses that want to control the atmosphere of that opening chaos. And I heard a lot about what is Cinco de Mayo going to be, and it sounds like in a lot of places it was a little out of control. So are you seeing those types of, they don't want people waiting in waiting rooms for salons and hair places and barber shops, and same thing for restaurants. Are you hearing about that and ways to confront that?
Yeah, I would say, going to that reservation system is probably the best methodology for doing that. Even that, it's kind of you're still going to have people milling about at some point. I mean, what you may want to do is, and I've seen some businesses doing this, is you have a reservation system, and then you text them when their table is available. So they wait in their car, or they're somewhere else until you give them 10 minutes to get there, or whatever arbitrary time frame you want to put. But doing that reservation system is important. The Dallas example I gave earlier was essentially outdoor waiting space for that restaurant. So, providing more space, using that public realm to provide some of that space to allow for that distancing, I think is also one of those methodologies. But I think, again, the reservation system, I think, is by far the best, because we don't want people waiting in these giant lines. I mean, remember 3 months ago when the restaurant's busy, how packed everybody is in together. We're trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
So one thing I forgot to mention in the presentation, I think is really important as we form our local work groups. Having health professionals at the table is incredibly important.
Yep.
But whether it's your county health office or the county health department, or your city health department, or having epidemiologists from your local hospital or university, making sure you have local health professionals at the table is incredibly important, because it also helps lend credibility to customers.
Yeah. Julie also asked, are you seeing other businesses hold off and doing a lessons learned based upon those around them?
Oh yeah, restaurants especially. One of the things, as we've talked to restaurants, 50% capacity seems to be the magic number where you start to turn profitability. And so to open at, say, a third is still going to cause those restaurants to lose money. So I think waiting into a point where you can see other businesses, and what other restaurants are doing, what's working and what's failing, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as you can survive on dine out only or takeout only, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And allowing kind of the space to get to where it is, where you can open up the way you want to open up to. I mean, that's the beauty of being a business owner. Everybody's very independently minded. But I think there's nothing wrong. As long as you can survive on takeout only, there's nothing wrong with waiting until the environment's right for them to open the way they want to.
Yeah, and mentioning the government question, what can they do to help? We had a community Lee Summit say that the city moved very quickly on putting in curbside pickup signage for those restaurants, because they feel that's still going to be part of the business model months and months out into the future, that until we can get those restaurants up to 100% capacity, that's still a big portion of their business. So they're helping them do that.
We actually saw one of the sign makers in Owasso, which is one of our main streets here in Michigan. One of the sign makers actually donated takeout only signs. Like, he printed up just a bunch that said takeout here, and they were generic, but he printed up a bunch and just told every restaurant in town, if you need one, come by and pick one up. They're free. And what he was doing is betting on the future, obviously, is when they're going to need signage in the future, they're going to remember who looked out for them. And I think that's the important part of all this, is how we treat our businesses as Main Street professionals and as other business in the B2B area. How we treat people is going to, I think, come back at some point. We call it business karma, but I think it's real.
Yeah, I'll answer this question. Someone just asked, what is CDBG? It's a community development block grant. It's money given to states by the HUD, the Housing Authority, under the federal government. It's a way to funnel a lot of money into communities. Most of the time in Missouri, it's used for infrastructure type projects. So Lindsay, on this topic, it looks like the Main Street program will be administering the loan program in exchange for a service fee, since they already have experience. So this is relating to that money that's coming down to the counties, that is then coming down to the municipalities. So Excelsior Springs is doing the city is working with the Main Street program to utilize their loan program. And I think they're really talking about it's more going to be forgivable loans.
That's awesome. That's exactly the type of thing. As we look to transition Main Street into being more economic development focused, how you make money differentiates too. So it's not just revenue on events. You can make money by servicing loans and by doing underwriting for other government entities. I think that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And the other point Lindsay makes is that a lot of the other cities in the county are just giving their money to the Economic Development Authority but Excelsior Springs was concerned about, working with people that maybe don't have bank accounts or aren't bankable.
Right.
And so they're keeping the funds local, so they have the local control. I think that's another good point. And a lot of the other communities in our county don't have a Main Street program, just Excelsior Springs and Liberty. So they're set up to have that mechanism and that knowledge to help administer those funds.
That's great.
Let's see. Barb asks, and maybe this is Joe, maybe I wasn't listening good enough. What do you mean by augmenting? I wasn't sure what that's in reference to. Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember. I say a lot of stuff. I don't always remember it. I don't remember how I say things.
Well, I was going to say, we can just let Barb, if she can give us a little more reference, we can move on to the next question. Yeah. So Barb, if you're still on, give us a little reference to that, and we'll come back to it.
I remember saying augment. I just don't remember the context of it.
Yeah. Chris Wilson says, thank you for holding this webinar. Local retailers and restaurants are being nimble. I also think the businesses that created a strong customer base are the winners. Those customers are coming back and supporting them. Those that did not have a good customer relationship are suffering. I think you would agree with that, Joe.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's, this crisis really exposes how together you have it, whether it's communication. It's funny, we do a lot of work with DMOs or destination marketing organizations too, through my wife's side, doing public relations. And, one of the things that I've always found, so I have a chamber background as well. So I've been the president and CEO of a regional chamber of commerce. And, I remember going through the education pieces saying, a strong nonprofit has 6 to 12 months of reserves, so that they can operate in a case like this. And we're seeing with DMOs, within a month, DMOs were laying people off, and so to me, I think this really exposes, now is not the time. I mean, some of our communities and some of our businesses are on the Titanic, no matter what they do, the ship's going to sink, but now is the time to start thinking about now that we're going through this, when we go through this again, what should we know? So start to think about planning ahead. For those communities who are looking at trying to reopen, we've started doing something called re-engage, re-energize, and reopen. So we're helping with that strategic planning, that strategic reopening. We've developed a process where we're helping communities do that remotely, so we can do committee meetings and we can do that kind of stuff for communities who are interested in having that facilitated. Just because sometimes there's just so much going on that's something that we've found that people are interested in. So.
Okay, just have probably one more question. Daryl Lynn, who is from Louisiana, I believe, or Arkansas. I can't remember, Daryl Lynn. Sorry, I know you've been on a lot of our webinars. What was the name of the place that did the customer survey?
Oh, actually, there was a couple. The two of our Main Street organizations did. One was Downtown Lansing, Inc., which is the Main Street organization for our capital city, and then Owasso Main Street, OWOSSO. In Owasso, Michigan, they also did a survey as well.
Sorry, Darylyn is from Alabama. She corrected me. Thank you.
That's right. She is from Alabama. And why don't we do this? We'll reach out and get those, and we'll put them on our resource library on our website.
Yeah. And the augmented question was in regards to engaging the community. If that clears it up.
Oh, geez. I'm sorry. I can, when I use augmentation, I use it in a way in which I'm talking about adding to whatever you're doing. So, if you're not currently, engaging the community, then it's not an augmentation, it's replacing, it's, building something new. But I think if you have an ongoing conversation, but being able to use that survey methodology, to me, I think allows for businesses to have quantifiable data from a third party, which is it's a difficult thing to find, especially something that's so hyper local. So I think that's a role that the Main Street organization can play, is to be able to do a survey like this, to be able to help, in this case, help augment their decision making, within those businesses, to be able to say, all right, here's what my gut says, but here's what the data says for the community.
Yep, great. I'm going to answer a couple questions. Somebody asked if this is being recorded. Yes, it is, and we have a COVID-19 resource page on our website where all of our webinars are recorded, so you have access to that whole library. And our web address is momainstreet.org. And then also our survey, Joe, we actually took the national survey and we continued it in Missouri for another few weeks. And so
Oh, wow.
we have the whole survey report is available on our website also at momainstreet.org. And one other person asked, are these webinars more geared towards Main Streets or Main Street organizations, Main Street communities? No, these webinars are more based upon anybody anywhere. We've opened everything up that we do. So whether you have a Main Street program or not, whether you have a chamber or not, these webinars are open to anybody and everybody. So we've made that decision a long time ago when we started that we would be there to help and assist in any community that needs it. So any final words, Joe? I think we got through all the questions.
No, I appreciate the opportunity and wish everybody luck. If there's anything that any of us can do to help, just give us a holler. I know you guys are really blessed to have Gayla and Keith and your team at the Missouri Main Street Connection there to work with you. So if you need to get a hold of us, go ahead and reach out through Keith or Gayla.
We
Thank you,
appreciate
Joe.
Yep, thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you very much.
We can't wait to see you in person.
That's right. That's right. But it may be a bender.
Yeah, well, I say don't forget Thursday's happy hour is at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and then May 19th to the 21st for the 3-day bender.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you, Joe. And
We
here's the
hope to-
commercial. Yep, here's
we
the
hope
commercial
to-
for our webinar next week, Navigating the New Reality Together. So hope to see you there.
That's right. Thank you. Everybody have a great week.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.